Good morning, I'm Andy Adams, Managing Editor at Canadian Yachting Magazine, and I'm at the rigging shop in Scarborough, Ontario with my dear friend John Gullick from the Canadian Power and Sail Squadrons. John is Manager of Government and Special Projects, and he has a project to talk to us about today. But to get the setup on this, what I want to mention is, of course, all of our readers are safe boaters. They care about being properly equipped when they set out in their boats each year, and there are government requirements for safety equipment. Anytime you have a somewhat larger boat, and it only has to be over 9 meters, I believe, then you have a flare requirement, safety flares that you have to take with you. And these flares have an expiry date. They have a shelf life where they are safe and reliable, and then after that, they have to be replaced. John is going to tell us what the situation is with that, because what do you do when they have to be replaced? John?
Well, you're absolutely right, and this has been an ongoing problem for years. Transport Canada, and prior to Transport, Canadian Coast Guard, has always had a mandatory requirement, as you indicated, for flare carriage. Depending on the size of the vessel, would depend on the number and types of flares that you'd have to carry. And those flares all have an approved shelf life. And they're clearly marked on the side of each flare, and we'll show that in a few minutes. But someone can determine, essentially, that it's 4 years from the date of manufacture here in Canada. So what do you do when you get to the end of the 4 years, and you now have X number of flares in your boat somewhere, stored in a nice, cool, dry place, and it's time to replace those? What do you do with the old ones?
Well, and to make the point, if the boat is between 9 and 12 meters, I think you need 6 flares. And if it's over 12 meters, you need a dozen flares of A, B, C, or D type, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, correct.
And that's a lot of flares. So what do you do?
Well, first of all, you can, just because the approved date is up after the end of 4 years, they're still usable. And so what people do is they will store, and they'll keep, like flares that are over 4 years, and maybe even over 8 years, and they would maybe use those first, were they in an emergency situation, and still have the approved number of flares on board if a law enforcement officer came along and said, "Let me see your flares." So you could keep them for a period of time, but eventually they get built up, and now you have to get rid of them. And in Canada, there is no formal scenario whereby one has a method of disposing of flares. And the community has been talking about this for years, and there has never been a formal solution to that. So we decided we'd step up to the plate and see if we could work with local retailers and Transport Canada and CIL Orion to develop a system to actually collect some of these flares, get them out of the system, and get them properly neutralized and disposed of.
Right, because to be clear, you're not allowed to set these off unless it's a real emergency.
Absolutely. So you can't, on July 1st, decide you're going to fire off, excuse me, you're going to fire off, a dozen of these flares. No. That is illegal, and, there are consequences for that.
Absolutely.
We used to have, in the past, flare days where we could actually work with Coast Guard and work with local fire and enforcement and so forth, and shoot these things off. But in recent years, the law enforcement and Coast Guard and Transport Canada have said absolutely not. It's against the law. You will not do it. So now the problem. So what we've done is we've set up with CIL Orion and Transport and local retailers a day in the year where customers can come into the store, boaters don't need to be a regular customer, they can come into the store, find out a little bit about the emergency and safety equipment that they need, find out a bit about their flares, bring in their old flares,
right.
We'll take them all in, we'll package them up in appropriate boxes to ship them back to CIL Orion, and then they get shipped back to CIL, and they neutralize those and take them out of the system.
So they're safely disposed of, and you just bring them to the store where Canadian Power and Sail Squadrons has set up one of these arrangements with a retailer.
Yep.
And is there any cost for it?
There is no cost, and we'll accept any flare made by any marine flare made by any manufacturer. So it doesn't have to be a CIL Orion flare, even though they're committed to the neutralization of the flares. They will accept a flare from any manufacturer as long as it's a marine type flare.
Well, that's great. Well, we certainly appreciate what CIL Orion is doing and their generosity in this case, and it's a wonderful initiative from the Power Squadron and their partners to try and help all the boaters. Everybody across Canada, watch for this, and we'll find out where you can give these, at the retailers as the opportunities come up.
Yep, and now what I'd like to do is to see if we can ask Carolyn Murray to come in. She's the principal here at the rigging shop, and just give a bit of a perspective from the retailer as to sort of their involvement and how they see this program working.
Perfect. Thanks so much, John.
So I've introduced Carolyn Murray. She's the principal here at the rigging shop. Last year we ran a pilot project across the country, and Carolyn jumped on this immediately, saw the potential and saw the need. And so we ran a project here a couple of times last year, and we brought in over 2,000 used flares over the time here. How did it work out from your perspective?
An overwhelming success. We've had, for years, we've had people asking for some kind of stewardship program to a place where they can take their expired, unused flares, and there was simply no solution. And last year you provided us the solution, and we're looking forward to 2 more flare recovery days this coming spring and summer, and I know that it will have an even greater impact on the ability for people to bring in their flares that they want to dispose of, and we'll look after them.
Yeah, that's great, and it's not just about flares too. We talk about all the required safety equipment, and it gives people who come into the store an opportunity to find out a little bit more about that and ask us and your staff about the kinds of things that they need and how to best use them.
Well, and these flare recovery days are also, your volunteers from the Power Squadron are here for long periods of time, ready and waiting to answer all of the boating safety questions that people might have. So it's a real win-win situation, and we're really proud to be participating with you on it.
Yeah, it's been a great partnership with the retailers and CIL Orion and Transport Canada. It's been a really good deal, and we're hoping that for the next few years it's going to carry on and serve the boating public well.
Wonderful.